A very good afternoon, everybody present in today's meeting. Let me take this moment to welcome everybody. And when I say everybody, I mean everybody. And also take this moment to appreciate the fact that it's Friday and you have put this time aside to come and be part of this very important activity in our subject calendar for this term. Welcome everybody, my colleagues in respective districts, and here I mean the subject advisors. Please feel welcome to be part of this important gathering. And above all, let me welcome subject teachers, subject heads, departmental heads, all of those who are involved in our subject. Before I take you through what I'm going to do today, let me just remind you of the house rules. By now we know that this platform is virtual and there are rules that we must all observe. And the very first one is that one of interruptions. Please, let's not interrupt one another and make this activity as smooth as possible. The settings of these meetings is that everybody has been muted, and it's been done like that so that we don't experience disruptions. If it happens that you mistakenly unmute yourself, please revert to muting yourself so that you don't end up disrupting the processes. Because I can tell you, if there is any noise background and you are unmuted, that will actually filter through to everybody, and it will be a disruptive kind of an activity, and we don't want to see that. And if you've got questions or comments, please hold them and let's reserve them at the end of the presentation so that it goes as smoothly as possible. And you must have received this program, and it is clear that program, it is a provincial program. That program is actually a mandate for all subjects. So our subject is not an exception. And you are assured of a recording of this activity immediately hereafter, or maybe in a day or 2 days time to come, you'll receive the recording. So that if you may have missed one or two things, or there are colleagues who could not be part of this activity, they can now go back and go through the recording, and the recording can also be used repeatedly. You can even use it even with your learners, or even with your colleagues. Here, I mean, subject advisors can take this recording also and use it and discuss it with teachers, lead teachers. You can do this as people who are leading groups in your clusters or in your respective districts. So, like it is captured there, this is mediation of annual teaching plan, and IM or diagnostic reports, but the focus being on Term 2 topics. Remember, we had an activity like this first term. Now we are having this activity again because all these mediations, they have been planned such that they take place on a quarterly basis, meaning that the beginning of the term, this activity takes place so that you are taken through what is expected and what may have taken place or what may have been noted during the marking in the 2025 November examination, and item and error analysis. What is it that may have been committed by those learners, and what is it that we can do to correct that? so that when you deal with topics that are affected for term 2, you already clear up what is now being sort of clarified. All right, my presentation outline will focus on the purpose. We'll look at the purpose, why this presentation. We'll look at 2026 ATP. But like I said, the ATP will focus on topics that are covered in the second term. And we'll also look at SBA tasks. SBA that links with term 2 according to the ATP. And then I'll also take you through an example of originality. We've done that in term 1, and I saw it fit that we must continue with example of originality, because in the past, some of the teachers, even some of the officials, were actually crying out loud to say originality is what is expected of learners to demonstrate when they answer essay questions. But examples of how they should go about doing that is not clearly sort of given or outlined to them. So featuring this originality as part of my presentation, it's also another effort to clarify how best originality can be sort of encouraged, and how learners can actually put in originality in their essays using topics from previous papers. And that should actually serve as a guide, because on a day-to-day basis, as a teacher in class, you are expected to guide your learners in as far as originality is concerned. So this will also guide you how your learners should, feature in originality in their essays, because it is expected of them to put originality in their essays so that they can get all the full marks in essays. And then I'll also take you through item and error analysis. This is basically diagnostic report and IM reports, because remember, IM reports were customized to learners in the Free State, but diagnostic report is sort of national. So what I've done, I've actually combined. I've taken a look at the Free State IM reports, paper 1, paper 2, for term 2 topics. What were the internal moderators saying about those topics? And also I looked at the diagnostic report, the DBE diagnostic report, which is now general and is now national, to say in general, in the 9 provinces, what is it that national may have observed, and what advice is national giving to us? So item and error analysis, it actually combines the two. And then last but not least, we'll look at the subject improvement plan, and then I will conclude my presentation. And as you can see, we've got 3 hours to do this activity, and I want us to do justice to the process, but we will not go beyond 3 hours. I will not keep you beyond 4 o'clock, because I understand it's Friday and it's actually the afternoon. So time is crucial, and it's precious to all of us. Okay, let's look at the purpose now. Firstly, this is a continuation of what we did in the first term. It's a continuation. Remember the first term, we focused on term 1 topics. And I've got no doubt those who used this to their advantage, it really must have helped them in preparing their learners for the March test. Now, this presentation is now focusing on term 2 topics. You are going to look at term 2 topics. What is it that the 2025 learners, as they were sitting for end of year examination, what is it that they did on all paper 1 and paper 2 topics, but focusing on only topics that are applicable in term 2, and give you advice because you have already started teaching term 2 topics. Some you have not yet covered. So this is actually a good platform for you to prepare yourself, to arm yourself when you go to class, to know already what is it you must do, what is it that you don't have to do. So this is a continuation of what we did in term 1. Secondly, we are doing this activity or this exercise to empower you teachers so that teaching and learning process can be strengthened. We want to strengthen teaching and learning process because we want you to take this into the classroom now. When you sit and prepare for a lesson on a specific topic, before presenting that topic, at the back of your mind, you already know the don'ts, the do's and the don'ts when it comes to this topic. We also, in this presentation, want to encourage frequent reference to the IM and diagnostic reports. We are aware during startup workshops, you are supplied with these very important documents like internal moderators reports, diagnostic reports. But if I may ask, how many have used these documents ever since they have received them from their subject advisors? You'll find that it will be maybe 3 out of 10. And we want not that to happen. We want you to refer to the internal moderators reports or even diagnostic reports throughout the year, but focusing on the topics that you are presenting at that time. So the purpose of this presentation is also to encourage you to frequently refer to these reports because they will definitely assist you and improve your teaching practice in class. Again, we want to strengthen understanding of certain topics and also application of content. Because if you as a teacher, you have full understanding of topics and concepts and you can apply them, it becomes easy to transfer that to your learners in class. We also want to guide and prepare learners for assessment accordingly. You know, if you use this information that you are going to get from this presentation well, you'll be able to guide your learners. You'll be able to prepare your learners for assessment accordingly. Remember, we are now going for the mid-year examination. June examination is coming, and we want learners to be better prepared for the June examination. And March assessment was covering a small scope of content, but mid-year assessment, the June exam, is going to focus on a bigger scope as compared to the March. And we want learners to now be prepared well before they sit for the assessment. That's another purpose why we are engaged in this activity today. And lastly, the reason why we are doing this, we want performance to improve. We want to improve performance in our subject, and we believe that this will definitely improve performance in in our subjects. And I'm sure by now you have analyzed your results, respective results in your schools, and others, you are happy with the performance of your learners, others, you are not so happy. This should actually help you to improve, to work on what did not work, so that going forward, come mid-year exams, your learners, they have improved and the performance is actually pleasing as expected. Now let's look at the annual teaching plan, the ATP. And remember, I said it's ATP for Term 2. Before we get to the ATP, I need to remind you of Circular E17 of 2025. Remember, it's a circular that has been shared with schools. It was shared with schools last year. We talked about it in the previous presentation. I'm reminding you right now. This circular E1725, it talks about the 2021 examination guidelines. Remember, we are talking 2021 examination guidelines, yet we are now in 2026. So this circular was actually extending the shelf life of the 2021 examination guidelines to 2026. What does that mean? Meaning that the 2021 examination guidelines remain valid and applicable for implementation in 2026. So the examination guideline for 2021 remain very, very important document that we must refer to all the time. Accordingly, the question papers for the May-June 2026, October-November 2026, and May-June 2027 will be based on the 2021 examination guidelines. Surely you can see the impact of this document, how huge the impact is, because the learners that are going to be sitting for May-June exam, that exam will be based on these guidelines. In November, when your learners sit for end-of-year exams, the examination, the paper, will be based on the 2021 guidelines. And even the May-June 2027 exams will also be based on the 2021 examination guidelines. So this document is so important because everything is derived from this document, and you can surely prepare your learners for assessment using this document. What does that mean? It means the annual teaching plan remains unchanged, is the same. And I want us now to go straight to the ATP for Term 2. When you look at the ATP for Term 2, the ATP for Term 2, the first topic is business sectors and their environments. What is it that you are expected or you must have taught by now when it comes to this topic? You must have covered the 3 types of business sectors. You must have covered classification of challenges according to the 3 business environments. And when you go to the examination guideline, it even talks about the extent of control. And business sectors, honestly speaking, it's actually a recap of what you have taught your learners in grade 10 and in grade 11. And you'll see even the assessment on this topic is normally not that much because the content is not much. So we expect learners to be doing well when it comes to this topic. And because this topic is simple, is straightforward, that's where your learners can benefit. But you'll see what the diagnostic report and the IM reports are saying in as far as questions that were based on this topic is concerned from 2025 grade 12 learners. How did they perform? What is it that they did wrong? What is it that you can do? to make sure that your learners for 2026 now, they guard against those mistakes. So make sure that you have covered types of sectors and you have covered classification and the extent of control. The second topic is, it falls under business operations and quality of performance, TQM. Quality of performance, quality. The following you are expected to cover, or you are busy covering those topics. First of all is concepts and their differences. Quality concepts and their differences. You're expected to cover them. Benefits of good quality management system. Contribution of quality of performance to the success and or failure of each business function. Quality indicators of each business function. The meaning of TQM. Impact of 5 TQM elements on large businesses. Application of PDCA model. The role or importance of quality cycles as part of continuous improvement to processes and systems. Impact of TQM if poorly implemented by businesses, and ways in which TQM can reduce the cost of quality. Make sure that all these bullets are covered. You've got the examination guideline and you've got your resources. Make sure that all these are covered. This is what is expected to be covered because learners will be assessed on this come June examination. The third topic, according to the ATP, that you are expected to cover this term, falls under business ventures and its management and leadership. The first bullet is the differences between management and leadership. We see this question coming every now and then. We'll also hear what does the diagnostic report or the IM reports say about questions that were based on this bullet and how did learners perform. But you are expected to clearly differentiate between management and leadership. This is what you must teach. Secondly, on the differences, I want to highlight something there. On the differences, on the second bullet, here we are talking about differences between leadership styles. Remember, you've got quite a number of leadership styles. And I have put in brackets there, democratic and autocratic leadership style. What do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that you've got, okay, democratic, autocratic, they are part of leadership styles. You've got the democratic, autocratic, laissez-faire or friendly, charismatic, and transactional. The 5 leadership styles. But when it comes to assessment will ask you or will ask learners to differentiate the differences between democratic and autocratic. You won't, come a situation where the examiner will ask, for example, learners to differentiate between charismatic and transactional. But when it comes to assessment, here I mean assessment. Assessment, the differences will focus on democratic and autocratic, the two. But the examiners may ask you, any question on laissez-faire, on charismatic, or even on transactional. I hope I have clarified that. And then the third bullet is on application of the 5 leadership styles. When is these styles applicable? When will they be applied? Questions will focus on application of any of the 5 leadership styles. The next bullet is on the impact of leadership styles. So all the 5 leadership styles, they've got advantages and disadvantages. It's part of what you must teach. And you cannot also forget the leadership theories. 3 leadership theories: leaders and followers, situational leadership, and transformational or transitional leadership. Those 3 leadership theories form part of what must be taught. Make sure that you cover that. And the last one is the role of personal attitude in successful leadership. The role of personal attitude. Make sure that you cover all of those. If you cover all of those, what I've just highlighted, you would have covered what you are supposed to cover in as far as management and leadership is concerned, and according to the ATP. And then the next topic is in investment securities, and it falls under business ventures. What are you expected to cover there under investment securities? Functions of the JSE, investment decision factors, type of investment opportunities and risk factors of each, impact of the 4 forms of investment, impact of the 4 forms of investment. And you've got your examination guideline, which will guide you. What do we mean when you talk of the forms of investment? And also when we talk of types of investment opportunities, refer to the examination guideline. Types of preference shares. It forms part of what you must cover this term under this topic. Differences between ordinary and preference shares, and the meaning of 4 investment concepts. Differences between simple and compound interest, calculations of simple and compound interest, and recommendation of types or form of investment based on calculations. This is what you must make sure that it's covered when it comes to investment securities. We are continuing. And then we come to investment insurance. You are expected to cover non-compulsory insurance and its meaning, the meaning of 4 insurance concepts, the meaning of 4 insurance concepts, differences, and examples. And insurance concepts here, I'm referring to over-insurance, I'm referring to under-insurance, average clause, reinstatement. In fact, there are 5, including excess. You are expected to cover the meaning of all those concepts. Insurable and non-insurable risks must be covered. 4 principles of insurance. They are even captured in the examination guideline. Indemnification or indemnity, security or certainty, utmost good faith, and insurable interest. Those 4 principles of insurance must be covered. Calculation of the average clause, advantages of insurance for businesses, compulsory insurance and its meaning, types of compulsory insurance, types of benefits paid by the UIF, and differences between compulsory and non-compulsory insurance. Make sure that you cover all these under investment insurance. We are continuing with topics in term 2. And the last topic for this term it falls under business roles, is team performance assessment and conflict management. What are you expected to cover under that? You're expected to cover team performance assessment, 4 criteria or characteristics for successful teams, 5 stages of team development, importance of team dynamics theories, causes of conflict, conflict resolution or techniques or steps, dealing with grievances and difficult people, differences between grievance and conflict, and dealing with 6 types of difficult personalities and dealing with difficult employees in the workplace. So as you can see, the content that must be covered this term is quite huge. You've got a lot to cover this term, but this is the last topic that must be covered in term 2. Look at your ATP, refer to the examination guideline, and make sure that you cover what is expected of you. Then your learners will be ready for the June examination. But remember, June exam is going to now cover term 1 content plus term 2 content, meaning that what learners covered in term 1 and what they covered in term 2 jointly, that will be assessed for June examination. SBA, let's look at SBA. What does SBA say to us? Term 2, you're expected to do a presentation task. Presentation task is a formal SBA task that must be done in term 2. And I must say, grade 12, you are going to have a provincial presentation task. But grade 10 and grade 11, it will depend on either is done in your districts or is done in your clusters, or it becomes an individual school task. But what the province will prepare is the task for grade 12 presentation task. Now, talking about presentation, maybe I must also touch on 1 or 2 things when it comes to this task. Presentation task is a unique task. When you compare presentation task to a test task, there's a vast difference between the two. And presentation task is unique in a sense that it focuses on special skill that is actually required for our learners to have acquired by the time they leave grade 12. Here I'm talking about that skill of presenting. Now, when you look at the task, you find that the task will be split into 2. We'll have marks for the oral part. The oral part, that's where learners have got to present. And you as the teacher, you now test or assess them on their presentation skills. And the experience that we have thus far and the challenges that we have with regards to this task is that most of the time, you teachers, you are running away from doing the oral part, yet that oral part is actually the core of this task, because that's where you get to assess learners on how to present. And we want learners to know how to present, because as a business, you'll be expected to make presentations. You will be expected to sort of attend meetings. You may be expected to, come up with a pitch, to pitch your business. When you pitch, you have to make a presentation. So learners have got to have that skill of presenting. Now, if you don't take your learners through that, you are denying them an opportunity, that very opportunity for them to get prepared in as far as presentation skills are concerned. So when you receive that task, make sure that you do the written part and the oral part. The oral part is every learner must present, and based on their presentation skills, then they must be assessed. And you must also give them feedback. You know, they must know that when you present, this is what must happen. This is not what you must do, and so on. And we know we've got different personalities of learners and so on, but taking them through presentation skills, it is what is required of you in as far as this task is concerned. So I thought I must just highlight that and also say the previous SBA moderation reports have highlighted irregularities, because if your school gets selected for provincial moderation and you have administered this presentation task, but you did not do, or your learners did not, were not exposed to being assessed for presenting, that is an irregularity. That is an irregularity, and we want that to change this year. Make sure that a presentation is fully covered. You do the written part and also the oral part, and learners get assessed on how they present, because you are preparing them on their presentation skills. So the presentation task is what is expected this term. And then, of course, the junior examination, you've got paper 1 and paper 2. So for 2026, nothing has changed, because even in 2025, presentation task was there. It is also here in 2026. The same applies to the junior exam. Let's look at the weighting. What is the weighting of the tasks? Presentation tasks for the term, it weighs 25%. And June examination, it weighs 75%. So it goes without saying, for your learners to pass in June, they must do well in examination. They must do well in examination. At the end of the year, presentation task, it weighs 10%. June examination, it weighs 25%. But remember, we still have got other SBA tasks to be done in term 3, and others have been done in term 1. So it's important to take note of that. And then let's come to what I spoke about earlier on. An example of originality. I must say, last year, what we observed is that learners are beginning now to infuse originality in their essays, meaning that you could see there are teachers who have taken an effort in guiding learners to come with originality in their essays. But remember, originality is for your level 7 learners, meaning that we want learners, to think outside, to be extraordinary, to come up with examples to show that they are, they follow the current trends, and they link that with what is happening outside with what they have been taught in class. You can just guide learners, but you cannot do originality for them. It's up to them to be, that's why we call it originality. It has got to come from them. You can't prescribe from them to say, this is an example that I want you to use. You must just guide them. So here, I've just taken a question from last year's paper. When you look at this question, it was an essay an essay based on investment insurance. That essay, there was a bullet or a question, bullet number 3, in fact, bullet number 2 in that essay was saying, explain the 3 types of compulsory insurance. Now, when we are asking for originality, this is just a guide. We expected learners to think out of the box and come up with something like this. If this question, for example, they have to come up with originality, we know that one type of compulsory insurance is road accident fund. Here is an example. The Minister of Finance, in his budget speech on the 25th of February, when this year announced that road accident fund or RAF levy on both petrol and diesel will increase by 7 cents per liter to 225 cents per liter. These adjustments will come into effect from the 1st of April 2026. Remember originality, it says, is there evidence of one example in any 2 of the 4 sub-questions not older than 2 years, which are based on recent of information, current trends, and developments. So when you look at the example that I've just given, it relates to the bullet, which is the second bullet when you look at that essay of paper 2. And it is also based on road accident fund as a compulsory insurance. And remember, the question wanted learners to explain road accident fund. And in the explanation of this type of compulsory insurance, there is a point where the funding, how road accident fund gets funded, it's also captured to say fuel levy contributes to the funding of road accident fund. So this, it links perfectly with the question, and it's just a demonstration of how originality can be brought into the essays. This is just an example. And I'm saying to you, take any question, think of an example, guide your learners, and encourage your learners to be alert and to follow what is happening currently and follow what is current and try to use that relevantly in questions that are being asked. The moment they do that, they will get full marks for originality. And when they get full marks for originality, we'll get a situation where we have learners scoring 40 out of 40 in our essay. So I hope this will also assist you. Remember, even this presentation, I'm going to make sure that you get this presentation. You're going to get a presentation, this PowerPoint, and also get the recording. This recording that we are busy with this presentation right now. Then you can refer back to it and use it and come up with other examples. But this is just a demonstration on how you can bring originality in as far as essays are concerned. I hope that it helps you a lot. Now let's come to the item and error analysis. This is item and error analysis of second term topics. Like I said in the beginning, we are focusing on topics that are treated in term 2, but taking cue from the question paper of 2025, both paper 1 and paper 2. What were the common errors and how can you go about correcting that so that you are better prepared when you go to class? Because like I said, we want to improve performance. We are going to start with paper 1 because the first topic, according to the ATP, is business sectors. And business sectors, it forms part of paper 1. But here, according to last year's question paper, we've got business sectors, which was asked as part of paper 1, and it was question 4.3. When you look at question 4.3, in fact, when you look at this topic, business sectors, remember I said it does not have much content. So you realize that this topic has been asked in section A, just one question in section A, and then only in section B, question 4.3. So we did not have many questions on this content because the content is not much. And I said we expect learners to do well because this topic is actually topic that comes as back as grade 10, and we expect learners to do well because it's not a problematic or kind of a difficult question, even though learners sometimes do not do well. When you look at question 4.3, it was a scenario, and learners were expected to do what? To quote challenges from the scenario and also classify challenges according to business environments. What were the common errors? Majority of candidates were able to quote challenges. They were able to quote the challenges from the scenario. But again, they were also unable to link the challenges correctly to the environment. This is an indication that candidates forgot the components of the different environments. What is it that you are expected to do now? Don't take this topic to be easy because learners still do mistakes on it. As teachers, you are expected to conduct a baseline assessment on the elements of each business environment so that learners may use them to identify the challenges posed by each and be able to classify them according to relevant business environment. Remember I said this topic, it comes as way back as grade 10. Just conduct a baseline assessment, check how much they know, and look at challenges, look at environments. And unfortunately, this question did not go further to test the extent of control, which is also possible that it can be tested. And what we have realized is that when learners now have got to also show that extent of control, they get all of those not right. And we are saying, prepare your learners, make sure that when you teach this topic now, probably you must have taught it because it was a topic that you must have treated last week. Probably when you do this topic, make sure that you clear all of those. There are previous questions based on different aspects that have been tested on this topic or on this sub-content. Use those previous papers and clarify to your learners. Make sure that any question based on business sectors, your learners do not struggle. And even especially your, level 1, level 2, level 3 learners, those learners that you feel, these are my weak learners, they should really not struggle with this content. And you can make use of practical examples to further clarify that content. That was the only question from 2025 question paper. And from there, we are going to the second topic according to the ATP, which is TQM, quality. And when you look at question 3.5, still on paper 1, question 3.5, it was about the concepts of quality, because the question was saying, outline the differences between quality control and quality assurance. These are just concepts. And you are still busy with TQM, I believe, right now. And when you started teaching this topic, you must have started with concepts. Clarify the concepts because they forever become part of assessment. Common errors when it comes to this topic. Some candidates in 2025, they confuse the meaning of quality assurance with quality control. They are confusing the concepts, and they confuse them because they are not clear. Others provided incomplete and vague responses on each concept and lost marks in such cases. What is a corrective measure thereof? It should be noted that quality control must take place first before quality assurance is addressed, as businesses must set targets and check the quality of raw materials before the actual production is done. Quality assurance focuses on the production processes, while quality control focuses on the quality of the final product and corrective measures that must be taken by businesses. So make sure that you clearly clarify that. I'm not sure if this is still happening in your schools, but way back when one was still, school-based, we used to have excursions. And I'm sure in your vicinity where you live, there must be some form of, factories where you can, with the permission of your school, of course, take your learners, to the actual production site. And if they can get to a production site, concepts such as quality control and quality assurance can now be practically observed. And because they can observe them practically, it will be easy for them to understand and to get them right. So I'm actually giving you something to think about. Excursions still play a very vital role in making sure that what you deliver in class, it gets home to your learners, and it helps learners to understand content even better. It makes them to link what they learn in class with what is happening outside. So still think of excursions. Still on quality. Question 3.6. It was a scenario, and it was about poor implementation of TQM. And you can see our question paper, section B, is full of scenarios. Make sure that your learners get used to scenario questions. They can't run away from that. And they will not be able to answer scenario questions if you are not assessing them informally, frequently, using scenario questions. Learners were expected to quote ways from the scenario in which the business apply TQM to reduce the cost of quality. What were the common errors? Some candidates or some learners quoted the distractor, and this is a common practice now. Remember, the examiner will not just put information straight as it is. The examiner will put information in the scenario, but also add a distractor, something that looks like it's correct, but it's not. And learners here were actually expected to code. The answers were given in the scenario. They were expected to code. So some, they coded the distractor instead of ways in which business can apply TQM to reduce the cost of quality. And they forfeited marks. 1 mark for this error. You know, 1 mark, it goes a long way. It means so much because that 1 mark can either make your learner pass or fail. Others did not read the follow-on question because there's also a follow-on question. 3.6.1 is the question that was based on learners quoting from the scenario, how the business can apply TQM, total quality management, to reduce the cost of quality. So that was given in the scenario. A follow-on question, 3.6.2, expected learners to discuss the impact now of TQM if poorly implemented by businesses. So you could see others did not read the follow-on question. The corrective measure is that this is application of knowledge. Teachers should alert candidates or learners on this style of setting as it is now common. I've just said, make sure that now you assess your learners informally using scenario questions, because scenario questions are basically application questions. They test application of content. So make use of scenarios more and come up with your own scenarios. Let's go to 3.6.2. Candidates forfeited marks by providing vague or incomplete responses when explaining the impact of total quality management if poorly implemented by businesses. Many answers lacked sufficient detail or failed to address the negative consequences comprehensively. This is also a recurring question that has been previously assessed in past exams. What will happen? The impact if TQM is poorly implemented. The answer is straight. The answer is straight. The impact will be negative. Teachers should unpack the impact of TQM if poorly implemented by businesses and give practical examples of the negative impact on business operations. Surely, the impact will definitely be negative. We know you may have taught your learners that the moment they see the word impact, you are talking of positives and negatives. But in this instance, you must tell them that here the focus is on the negative side, because the question is, what will happen if TQM is poorly implemented? There's nothing positive that will come. All the responses that are going to provide, they will be negative. And make use of examples. Teachers can assist. You can assist your learners to identify key phrases such as setting unrealistic deadlines, decline in productivity, and decline in sales. To complete sentences, give them phrases so that they can complete the sentences and have an understanding, and so that they can remember. You can also provide scenario-based activities to strengthen your learners' ability to respond with clarity and depth in assessments. I cannot overemphasize the importance of scenario questions. Still with TQM, you can see there were quite a number of questions on quality in paper 1. But remember, quality also, it has got a lot of content and it forms part of paper 1, and it's a topic that you are going to teach now in term 2. This takes us to question 3.7. It was about the advantages of monitoring and evaluation of quality assess processes as TQM element for large businesses. The impact. Common errors. The elements of TQM continued to pose a challenge for candidates, particularly in describing the advantages of monitoring and evaluation of quality processes for large businesses. Many candidates struggle to provide clear, detailed responses, which resulted in the loss of marks. It shows that this continues to be a challenge. So it means when it comes to the elements of TQM, make sure that you do justice. Make sure that you clarify. And TQM elements are clearly stated even in the examination guideline. What is it that you're expected to do? You should unpack the meaning of TQM by using practical examples and focus on the word total. The aim is to involve all employees, systems, and approaches to satisfy customer needs beyond their expectations. So the word total is, is inclusive, everything. It means quality, it impacts everything that is done. There is nothing that is not significant. Total, the word total, you involve employee systems, approaches, everything to make sure that customer satisfactions, they are customers' expectations, they are actually achieved. Learners must know that the focus of TQM systems and processes is to improve the quality of an organization's outputs, including goods and services, through the continual improvement of internal practices. Now, as a teacher, you must also clarify the purpose of monitoring and evaluation and reinforce that monitoring and evaluation. They are not just routine checks, but they are strategic tools that help large businesses maintain and improve their quality standards. You must also incorporate case studies from companies when covering this aspect of the curriculum. You just get into the internet. There's so many case studies you can come up with. Or if you don't want to go that route, you can think of companies around here. For example, if you've got a company in your vicinity, you can use that as a case study. And this takes me back also to what I earlier on highlighted, that the role of excursions cannot be underestimated. They still play a very key role. And these are some of content aspects that can actually be clarified when you take an excursion with your learners and you expose them to the real world, and they get to ask questions. They've got to relate what is happening outside with what you are telling them in class in real practical terms. Make sure that TQM elements, you do justice, because learners continue not to do well in this content, and we want them to do well now in June, because I can assure you, TQM elements, they're going to form part also of paper 1 in June. TQM again, question 3.8, quality indicators within business functions. Common errors. This question actually wanted learners to come up with quality indicators of public relations function. What are the quality indicators within public relations functions. What were the errors? Candidates, their responses, they focused on providing quality products to the public. You see where they missed it. They were talking about quality products to the public rather than addressing the quality indicators of public relations. As a result, they forfeited marks for not aligning their answers to the specific requirements of the question. Some confused public relations with marketing function. In addition, the quality indicators provided were often vague or imprecise. This illustrates a continuous challenge in this section of the curriculum. And remember, this question also, it comes as way back as grade 10. Quality has been addressed in grade 10. And by now, one was expecting learners to be doing well, to be now understanding when you talk of quality indicators within business functions. It says when you come to this part of the content, you must also go back a bit. Try to remind them, take them step by step, and take each function one by one so that they understand what indicates quality within each business function. Corrective measures. Explain to learners that public relations is not about product quality, but it is about how business promotes its image, communication, response to media coverage, and its relationships with stakeholders. You should also highlight that marketing promotes products or services to drive sales, whereas public relations, it promotes the business reputation, credibility, and stakeholder relationships. So you can do all this practically with them and trying to remind them of what they've learned in grade 10. But I can assure you, quality indicators, learners always get, they get confused. And surely there is something that you're not doing right. And I'm saying to you, with this presentation, prepare your learners now better for this topic going forward. You can see paper 1, TQM, there were quite a number of questions on TQM. Question 4.8. 4.8 was also a scenario. Learners were expected to name the TQM element in the scenario. And then 4.8.2 was a follow-on on the benefits of a good quality management system. But 4.8.1, where they had to name the total quality management element applied in the scenario, it was a problem. Many candidates were unable to identify the element, and the element was adequate financing and capacity as a TQM element from the given scenario. They subsequently forfeited a mark. This question was 2 marks. They forfeited 2 marks for this question, and even for the motivation also, as it is dependent on the correct identification of the TQM elements. All TQM elements that are outlined in the 20 examination guideline should be adequately taught using practical examples. And you can even use video clips on how large businesses implement each TQM element. Learners could be requested to conduct research on businesses that have implemented these elements successfully. As a teacher, you must also emphasize that adequate financing and capacity refers to ensuring that a business has sufficient financial resources to successfully implement TQM. So TQM elements, they are problematic, but we are saying with this presentation, it must help you now to better be prepared when you get to class so that you clear up all those misconceptions and your learners are ready when it comes to assessment come June examination. Continuation with TQM. Question 4.9. It was on the role of quality circles. Candidates performed poorly as they did not have an in-depth knowledge of the roles of quality circles as part of continuous improvement of processes and systems. Some responses were based on ways in which TQM can reduce the cost of quality, while others focus on the impact of continuous improvement on processes and systems as a TQM element. The same question had been asked in the 2022, 2023, and 2024 NSC examinations, and areas of improvement were noted in the 2022 and 2023 National Diagnostic reports. So we are actually saying this is not a new question, but learners continue not to do well. And strange enough, teachers like to say, you know, quality is easy. My learners, I'm going to encourage my learners to focus on quality. But here are the questions, learners still don't do well in the very same questions or topics that you deem not difficult. So it's important that this presentation helps you to be better prepared for topics to come. You must remind learners that quality circles, it's all about small groups of employees who meet regularly to identify, analyze, and solve problems relating to quality, and that their role must be elaborated on when responding to questions related to quality circles. It must be explained to learners that the role of quality circles is not to be involved in the actual production of a product, but rather on improving production by investigating the problems related to quality. They also suggest solutions aimed at monitoring or reinforcing strategies to continuously improve the quality of products. We are now done with the second topic, which was quality, based on the 2025 examination. Now we are going to the third topic, according to the ATP, which is management and leadership. And this topic now, it falls under paper 2. When you look at this topic, management and leadership, the very first question, it was question 2.4. Learners were given a scenario and they were expected to identify the leadership style applicable in the scenario. The question was generally well answered. Most learners did well, with most candidates correctly identifying that the leadership style applied or implied in the scenario was autocratic leadership style, though some were confused by both. Some were confused by the scenario and incorrectly chose situational, transactional, or transformational styles. This confusion caused several candidates to forfeit marks for both the leadership style and the corresponding motivation. Remember, they were provided with a table, they identified the style, and they motivate. And if the leadership style is incorrect, surely even the motivation will be wrong, and they forfeited marks. And it goes back to what I said earlier on, scenario questions, because this is purely application of content. A clear explanation and distinction of all 4 leadership styles as outlined in the examination guideline of 2021 should be regularly revised to improve learners' understanding. Learners must also be taught to quote full sentences from scenarios where applicable. We've seen this happening. Sentences are quoted but not in full, and sometimes what they have quoted does not even have the essence, and then they forfeit marks. And remember, questions such as those ones where learners are expected to quote, those are like appetizers. Those are like your low-hanging fruits, and we expect even your level 2, 3 learners to be able to do that. Now, if they get that wrong, if they quote but they don't quote in full, and what they have quoted, it does not even have the essence, they forfeit even that 1 mark that was given. And remember, a quotation is there in the scenario. Why don't they quote that in full? Please talk to your learners and advise them. And informally, when you assess them, if they do such a mistake, penalize them heavily so that they can see the seriousness of the mistake that they are doing, so that they don't do that come a formal assessment task time. The second question, the common question, 2.5. The role of personal attitude in successful leadership. Describe the role of personal attitude. The common question. It's been there in paper 2. Candidates performed satisfactorily. However, you still have some, and we cannot sort of, say mostly performed well. What about those that did not do well? That's why we say some responses were vague or generalized, describing general or positive attitudes or the characteristic of a good leader instead of the role of personal attitude in successful leadership. As a result, marks were forfeited and incomplete or off-topic answers. This is a common kind of a question. You are expected to teach and revise this content, thoroughly, and emphasize how a positive attitude contributes to the success of, leadership in a business. Discussions must focus on clearly explaining the role of personal attitude in leadership. Integrate application-based activities and informal assessment to familiarize learners with exam questions while clearly explaining requirements and addressing common errors from diagnostic reports. So this is a common question. Make sure that you also deal with it thoroughly, this content, when you get to it. You are still going to teach management and leadership, and we are preparing you for that. Still on management and leadership, question 4.3. Common question, very common question. Differences between management and leadership. Explain the differences or the difference between management and leadership. Performance was generally fair, with many candidates able to explain the differences between management and leadership. However, some candidates, you still had some candidates who were confusing the two concepts by swapping their factors, mixing management and leadership. You know, some facts which are supposed to be under management, they are in leadership. And then those that are supposed to be in leadership, they are in management. You can see that there is still that confusion. It's a common question. These concepts are common. We are saying to you, watch out. Make sure you clarify from the word go. The teaching should provide clear and detailed explanations of management and leadership using demonstrations and practical examples. Learners must understand that leaders communicate directly with employees, while managers communicate through formal management structures. And here you must also take note. Notes should be structured and updated to cover management before leadership. And learners are encouraged to write full and clear sentences. You know, learners, they are into this habit of writing just small phrases that end up not making sense. And with just a small phrase, they will get 1 mark instead of 2 marks. So this concept of management and leadership is very, very critical. Let's take it further, because you'll also find this in the diagnostic report. It must be noted that the following statements were elaborated on during the marking standardization meeting. When last year in 2025, when all provinces were discussing the memo, the following points were elaborated and they were agreed upon. What does that mean? It means going forward, meaning this year, the responses that have been elaborated are as captured there. You are advised to update these facts in your resources. Let's look at management. In the past, learners could get 2 marks for simply saying management is instructional. But they can't get 2 marks anymore because this fact has been elaborated upon. You must, when you teach your learners now, you must make sure that they get this right. For them to get full 2 marks, they must go further to say management is instructional in their approach by guiding or training or directing employees. It's then that they can get full 2 marks. When it comes to leadership, leadership is inspirational. They were getting 2 marks for that. They got 2 marks last year, but this fact has now been elaborated upon. For them to get 2 marks now going forward, they must say leadership is inspirational in their approach by energizing, motivating, or encouraging employees. Going back to management, remember they were getting 2 marks for simply saying management is task-oriented or orientated. Now going forward, for simply saying management is task-orientated, they will get 1 mark because this point has now been elaborated. What is expected of them to get full 2 marks? They must say management is task-orientated and focuses on completing goals or on completing deadlines or processes. It's then that they will get full 2 marks. On the other side, leadership, they were getting 2 marks when they say leadership is people-orientated. They were getting 2 marks, but going forward, this fact has been elaborated upon. They must say leadership is people-orientated and focuses on building relationships or morale or development. Is then that they can get full 2 marks. Going back to management, there was a fact which was saying management does things right. They were getting 2 marks. Not anymore, it's 1 mark. If they simply say that. They must further say, by focusing on efficiency or execution, is then that they can get full 2 marks. Management does things right by focusing on efficiency or execution. Leadership does the right things. They were getting 2 marks for that, but they are going to get 1 mark if they only end there. To get full 2 marks, they must go further to say, by focusing on the vision or strategy. Going back to management, manages the how and when. They were getting 2 marks. But now, going forward, they must go further. Manages the how and when regarding processes or timelines of a task. Leadership, ask what and why. They were getting 2 marks. They must go further to say, leadership or leaders ask what and why to foster a deeper understanding for improvement. So I hope these facts, you have taken note of them. They are there in the diagnostic report. You are still going to get them in this PowerPoint presentation. And you make sure that when you come to this content, you clarify or you update your resource so that come the end of the year, when a question is asked, you don't later say, but learners should have, been marked this way, but they were not marked this way. This has been now agreed upon by all the provinces, and these facts have been elaborated upon. That's that about management and leadership. Going now to the next topic that we must still cover this term, which is investment securities. Let's see how this topic was assessed last year and how learners performed. The first question on securities was on investment decision factors. Question 2.1. Name any 2 factors that should be considered when making investment decisions. Overall performance in this question, it was good. Learners did well, although some candidates confused investment decision factors with investment opportunities, leading to irrelevant responses. So you still had learners who were like sort of confusing the two. And corrective measure here is that you as a teacher, you must go back to this 2021 guideline, because the guideline clearly states and outlines those factors that must be considered when making investment decisions. And learners should regularly practice the correct terminology, supporting by ongoing informal assessment. And then 2.3, the common question also, it was there. It was on the functions of the JSE. Common errors. The performance was adequate, although some candidates provided incomplete responses. The use of outdated resources was also evident among a number of candidates. This content has appeared in multiple past papers, and candidates should not provide phrases in their responses. Please talk to them to provide responses in full. As a teacher, you should also ensure that your learners write in full sentences when explaining the JSE functions and understand mark allocation for action verbs. You must refer to recent marking guidelines, especially note number 12 of the notes to markers for the allocation of marks or of ticks. Because you could see that the question itself, it was saying explain the functions. So there is split marking there. There is part marking because of the verb explain. And some of the candidates were like giving incomplete responses and phrases, and they were forfeiting marks instead of writing in full and getting the full marks. When it comes to this content, do justice. Still on investment securities. Question 2.7. It's also common. The impact of government or retail saving bonds. Common errors. There was poor, there was a poor sort of response in as far as this question is concerned. Learners generally performed poorly, and candidates were confusing RSA retail saving bonds with fixed deposits or unit trusts. Responses were often incomplete or combined with multiple facts, and candidates failed to state the advantages or disadvantages of the bonds, because the question says the impact, and we expect them to clearly state the advantages and the disadvantages. Corrective measures. The differences between RSA retail saving bonds, unit trusts, and fixed deposits must be clearly explained using key terms, because some learners, some candidates were clearly confusing them. When it comes to this content, clearly make sure that those differences are clearly explained. Learners should research this investment type and analyze recent newspaper articles to identify advantages and disadvantages. Case studies on retail saving bonds should be integrated into teaching for deeper understanding. I'm not sure how many of you still collect, newspapers that you can come and share with your learners. Or even you as a teacher, get an article from a newspaper, come and share it with them, ask them questions on it, so that you clarify certain concepts, certain content, by bringing what is happening outside into the classroom. I'm wondering, because there's a lot of material that you can use, that material that can help you drive points in your class is there. You can get into the internet, or you can even go and look for printed newspapers and look for articles. And by so doing, your learners will be recent, and they'll be able to relate what you are teaching them with what is happening. 4.2, identification of type of investment opportunities from statements. Here, candidates were given statements, and they were expected to identify the type of investment opportunity from the statements. Many candidates, a lot of them in this question, 4.2.1, they were naming forms of investment or unrelated concepts instead. Common errors included confusing debentures. Others were talking about debentures with shares, loans, or venture capital, and mixing investment opportunities with decision-making factors. It was just sheer confusion on this question. And remember, this is application of content, because they are provided with a statement, and from the statement, they're expected to identify the type of investment opportunity. Teachers should focus on the investment opportunities as outlined in the 2021 examination guidelines, to ensure that learners can identify and explain them in scenarios and statements. Clear distinction between different investment opportunities must be emphasized. Regular exposure to source-based questions, newspaper clippings, and varied assessment tasks will help prevent confusion with factors to consider when making investment decisions. There it is. Bring reality and go to the examination guideline, because the content is clearly outlined there. And sometimes we ask, what makes learners to confuse forms of investments and types of investments? Because it's clearly outlined in the examination guideline. Now, stepping off investment securities, now we come to investment insurance, because this forms part of content that you are expected to teach in term 2. The first question, it was 2.2, and it was on insurance concepts. This question was on the concept excess. Elaborate on the meaning of excess as an insurance concept. 4 marks. The question was poorly answered, with many candidates unable to correctly explain the meaning of excess as an insurance concept. Responses were often vague or incomplete, with candidates confusing excess with insurance in general. Others, they were confusing it with premium. Others, average clause, and over or under insurance. Many also use the terms insurer and insured interchangeably, or focus on the advantages of insurance instead of the concept tested. This pattern indicated insufficient preparation for the business venture topic and limited understanding of the concept excess. And when you look at this concept excess, I thought, you as a teacher, because most of you, you've got cars and your cars are insured and you've got contracts, and in your contracts, excess, it forms part of the contract. Some you've been involved. There were instances where you even had to pay that excess. And you can explain this from the point of experience to say, I even experienced this. I thought, this concept was not going to be something difficult for learners to explain, but let me tell you, it was a mess. It was a mess. So what is it that is expected? The corrective measure. You are expected to clearly explain the concept excess as part of the insurance contract and emphasize that excess is paid upfront by the insured when a claim is lodged. And all of these are the things that you know, are the things that you can even explain. You can even explain. Learners must distinguish between key insurance concepts using accurate definitions, practical examples, and varied assessment strategies. You as a teacher, you should actually apply the latest marking guideline and DBE notes and encourage full sentence responses when elaboration is required. It must be noted that the following statement was elaborated during the marking standardization meeting, and your resources must be updated accordingly. This fact is saying excess is not paid out to the insured when a claim is settled, but is recovered from the liable party by the insurer. And this is actually practical. And make sure that you elaborate this clearly in your resources. You update it in your resources. Still on investment insurance, examples of insurable risks. Question 4.1. Give any two examples of insurable risks. You know, we thought this was actually an easy kind of a question. Many candidates confused insurable and non-insurable risk in this question, often citing examples such as fire and theft instead of the required non-insurable risks. Marks were also lost through vague or incorrect responses. For example, writing shoplifting instead of shoplifting during business hours. You see, overall, question 4.1 was poorly answered with many irrelevant or incomplete responses and several left blank spaces, despite this topic being assessed across all sections of past papers. So it's actually really it's discouraging to know that despite this question being asked many times, the response was actually not what was expected. And because it's an easy kind of, it's an appetizer, we're expecting learners to do well. As teachers, you should use comparative tables with practical examples to clearly distinguish between insurable and non-insurable, supported by updated notes. What does that mean? I mean, draw a table, write insurable this side and non-insurable this side, so that your learners can clearly see what is it that is falls under insurable, what falls under non-insurable, and also use examples. You should actually explicitly explain that non-insurable risks cannot be transferred to insurers and must be managed directly by the business. Using real-world case studies will make insurance concepts more engaging and easier for learners to understand. And with insurance also, I mean, I spoke about the use of excursions earlier on. If you don't want to use excursions, you can even invite, if it's possible, you can invite an insurance broker to your class or maybe to your school to just give a 1 hour, 2 hour session on insurance, and can even maybe give practical examples and so on. So you've got all the tools that can help you deliver the content in class. Yours is just to be creative enough and to use what is available at your disposal to make sure that that content, it does not become a mountain to climb. So it's all in your hands. Still on insurance investment. Differences between insurance and assurance. Most candidates performed well, correctly outlining the differences between insurance and assurance. However, some confuse the concepts. You still have those that will confuse the concepts, meaning what they're supposed to write under insurance, they write it under assurance, and vice versa. Mixing examples of short and long-term insurance or writing about under and over insurance instead. A few responses were vague and incomplete, earning only part marks. So they will forever forfeit marks. What is it that you're expected to do when it comes to these differences of, of concepts? You should clearly distinguish the two, insurance and assurance, using practical examples and real life scenarios. The principle of indemnification applies to short-term insurance, while security relates to long-term assurance. And learners must understand this distinction. Full sentences should be used when outlining differences, and tabulating the information can help link concepts effectively. Teaching all insurance concepts in detail enables learners to gain insight and apply knowledge accurately, avoiding confusion between the two. It boils down to what I also suggested. You can invite an insurance broker to your school to come and help. Your learners can even ask questions. You can prepare questions. And I know insurance brokers, because they are also business inclined. You can strategically even, discuss this with the management, with your principal, to say a certain broker will be visiting, because I know, because they also want to do business, they would want to address, address the staff, they would want to sell their products to the staff. So you say you come and address the staff. Immediately thereafter, now I take you to my class. You come and address and clarify and address all questions relating to insurance to my learners. So there are so many ways of doing this, and it is there at your disposal. But we want learners to do well, because even this topic, investment insurance, is a topic that, learners should be doing well in it. Still on insurance, types of compulsory insurance. Remember, I made reference to this when I was dealing with originality. On the types of compulsory insurance, this comes under question 5, bullet number 2. Explain the 3 types of compulsory insurance. Most candidates were able to list the 3 types of compulsory insurance, but many provided incomplete, vague, or inaccurate explanations. What does that mean? The question is saying explain. Okay, they managed to list the types of compulsory insurance, but they could not explain. Where they had to explain what, road accident fund is all about, they couldn't, or they provided incomplete or vague or inaccurate explanations. Some confused UIF with its benefits, either with the Act, or listed non-compulsory insurance instead. Now, what are you expected to do? Clearly distinguish between compulsory and non-compulsory insurance, and use a table or 2-column comparison to show the difference. Learners must be able to name and explain the types of compulsory insurance. It must be noted that the following statements were elaborated on during the marking standardization meeting, and resources must be updated accordingly. Again, here, make sure that you take note of this and you update this content. Employees contribute 1% of their basic wage to UIF as a financial safety net or backup funds. The fund covers or compensates employees or domestic workers for occupational diseases and injuries incurred at work or the workplace. Make sure that, because you see 5.3.1 was with regard to UIF, 5.3.2, you see it is with regards to what? To COIDA. Go to those notes and update them accordingly. Still on insurance, 5.4, advantages of insurance. It's a common question. Most candidates struggled to provide the advantages of insurance. This was actually a disappointment. They were often explaining the meaning of insurance instead. Some responses focused on individual insurance or gave vague statements rather than business-specific benefits. You are expected to focus on the advantages of insurance for businesses, because here we are dealing with insurance, but in the context of a business. Using the key words to help learners to formulate clear, relevant statements. Emphasis must be placed on business-specific benefits. That's why I'm saying the context when it comes to advantages of insurance, it's insurance focusing on businesses. What are the advantages that insurance brings forth for businesses? The emphasis must be placed on business-specific benefits, such as protection against losses from natural disasters or dishonest employees. So, business-specific benefits. Still on insurance, the principles, 5.5. And remember, in this question, the principles were given. Advise businesses on the following principles of insurance. They were given: utmost good faith and insurable interest. Many candidates struggled to explain the principles of insurance because they were given and they were expected to explain. They were struggling to explain them, particularly utmost good faith and insurable interest. Instead, they were providing vague or incorrect responses. Some confused insurable interest with general financial interest or investment gains. Overall, limited understanding of these principles led to poor performance in this question. Question 5.5, limited understanding. So when it comes to this content, make sure that you do justice all those 4 principles. They can either identify them from the scenarios, or when given, they can also even explain them. They can even give examples of those insurance principles. You can also give practical examples in class. You are expected to do what? To thoroughly explain the 4 principles, particularly utmost good faith and insurable interest, and use examples and demonstrations. Learners should be able to identify each principle in statements or even in scenarios. You see, I'm overemphasizing that because the same question can be asked in section B in the form of scenarios. And include relevant examples in the answers. You are also advised to use clear tables and keywords to help learners remember, so that they can apply each principle effectively. Because application, that's the way to go. We are done about investment insurance. Now we are coming to the last topic that you must treat in Term 2 according to the ATP. Now let's look at this topic. How did the learners perform in 2025 in as far as this topic is concerned, and what is it that you must guard against when you are going to teach this topic, so that your learners are better prepared for the assessment come June? The first one, and this forms part of paper 2, is criteria for successful team performance. You find this in question 3.4. Question 3.4 was saying discuss communication as a criterion for successful team performance. 6 marks. The performance was poor, not just poor, very poor. This question was poorly answered, with many candidates giving vague and incomplete responses. Most learners lacked content knowledge and confused communication with general team performance characteristics. This indicates a lack of understanding of communication as a criterion for successful team performance, even though this question has appeared in section B and section C of past examination question papers. Corrective measures. In-depth teaching should focus on explaining all criteria. Remember, you've got that criteria, you have it in the examination guideline. And in this instance, the examiner only picked one criterion, which is communication. But you are expected to teach or to go in depth in as far as the whole criteria is concerned. According to the examination guideline, you've got interpersonal attitudes and behavior as the first criteria. You've got shared values as the second criteria. You've got communication, which was asked, as the third criteria. And you've got collaboration as the fourth criteria. Go in depth and explain each criteria and activities involved in each criterion. You should provide source-based and direct questions to reinforce understanding and model full sentence responses. Opportunities for practice and discussion should be created to ensure that learners grasp the meaning and application of each criterion. Still on team performance assessment. Another common question, question 4.7. It was on team dynamic theories. Describe the importance of team dynamic theories in improving team performance. It's a common question. The performance was dismal also here. Many candidates gave vague or incomplete responses and confused the question with team performance, creative thinking, or workplace diversity. Some merely listed theories without explaining their relevance in improving teamwork. Overall, learners showed limited understanding of team dynamics. This question has appeared in past papers, question papers on several occasions, highlighting persistent content and knowledge gaps. It's been there. And what's actually even worse is that you've got these theories in grade 11. Just ask for textbooks in grade 11 when you come and teach this, and take your learners through those theories, because the whole idea is for them to understand. If they understand the theories, now they can understand the importance thereof. They must clearly know, what is this theory all about? What is this theory all about? When understanding the theories, it becomes easy now for them to come up with the importance of those theories. Learners must understand the difference between team dynamics theories and the characteristics of team development. They were confusing that. That's what you must clarify. You should also emphasize that these theories they help leaders understand team members' personality types to assign tasks more effectively. Understanding and applying team dynamic theories enable learners to explain how they contribute to successful team work. So this corrective measure can be of help to you over and above what I suggested that I know grade 11 textbooks, they still have those theories. Just ask for them from your colleagues. Take your learners through these theories so that they understand the theories and then come to the importance thereof and clarify that difference between theories and characteristics of team development. They seem to have confused those two. And stepping off team performance assessment, we're going to conflict resolution or conflict management. Question 3.5.1. It was on the causes of conflict. 3.5.1. Learners were given a scenario. They were expected to quote causes of conflict from the scenario. Many candidates answered this question well, but some forfeited marks by incorrectly naming the cause of conflict or quoting a distractor from the scenario. I spoke about the distractor earlier on. Others lost marks for not providing a full quotation that captured the required essence. Please, we expect learners to quote in full. And you can only practice or familiarize your learners by making use of previous papers and using those previous questions as informal assessment frequently. Here I'm talking about scenarios. The concept of conflict should be explained using practical workplace examples. Explain to them what is a conflict. And again here, we are talking about conflict in the context of business at workplace. Learners must be taught to quote full sentences to gain full marks. In fact, teaching should focus on explaining the causes of conflict in the workplace and applying action verbs such as outline, describe, explain, and discuss. They must know exactly when these verbs are used. How are they expected to answer? You must explain that. And the marking guideline, those 2 markers, has this note that you must refer to explain all these verbs to your learners so that they know how they're going to be marked. Question 3.5.2, it was a follow-on question. The handling of conflict, because it was saying, explain how businesses should handle conflict in the workplace. Some candidates forfeited marks by confusing handling conflict with grievance procedure. They were confusing the two. Others gave incomplete responses or short phrases instead of full sentences. Candidates were expected to perform well in this question, but others, they were also using outdated resources and they were providing incomplete sentences, which led to them forfeiting marks. What are you expected to do? What is the corrective measure from your side? You must ensure that learners write full sentences when explaining how businesses should handle conflict. And you must clearly distinguish this from grievance procedure, because they forever confuse grievance procedure with the handling of conflict. Learners should understand that conflict resolution involves informal techniques between employees, while grievance procedure addresses the aggrieved employee formally. And there are so many examples, practical examples that you can use. There are so many examples that you can use. But remember, it's conflict in the context of business. And this is the last topic that we're going to teach according to the ATP. And this is how learners performed. And this is what we're saying, guard against when now delivering content in as far as this topic is concerned in term 2, so that your learners are better prepared for examination come June. Essays, coming to essays, both paper 1 and paper 2. Some candidates forfeited marks in the introduction and conclusion, as they could not link the statements with the questions. Some were also using the preamble for this purpose, and they also forfeited marks because of that. Remember, we said preamble is treated as repetition. Now you can see that learners are still struggling with introduction and conclusion, and we expect them to pocket those marks. Corrective measure. The candidates must respond to at least any 2 of the 4 sub-questions in the introduction, and at least 1 of the 4 sub-questions in the conclusion. And what is it that you must do now? Practice your learners. You can give them a topic and say to them, as an informal assessment, can you come up with an introduction and only conclusion for this topic? And that is your assessment. And you guide them and clearly explain to them that now, when it comes to introduction and conclusion, the statements should link with what is being asked. That's why it says candidates must respond to at least any 2 of the 4 sub-questions, meaning the statement should link with any of the 2 bullets or 2 questions in the essays, and at least 1 in the 4 sub-questions in the conclusion. And verbatim quoting of definitions or facts from credible sources is strongly discouraged, no matter how good they know the quotations or the definitions. When they quote them verbatim, word by word, without tweaking them and making them to fit as statements in the introduction or in the conclusion, that is discouraged and they will forfeit marks. No marks will be awarded for contents repeated from the introduction and conclusion. And the same applies to what I've said. They will not be awarded marks. That will be treated as repetition again when they take information from the preamble and they use that either into introduction or in the conclusion. So introduction and conclusion, you also have you've got time and you've got the power to prepare your learners well when it comes to introduction and conclusion. Assess them informally. Give them any topic. Pick any topic. Say to them, please bring me introduction and conclusion on this topic, and mark them and guide them. Check whether it links with what is expected. I'm telling you, what we are picking up is that learners, they struggle to come up with the correct introduction or conclusion, because they did not have enough practice on that. And it's only through practice and through exposure that they will be better prepared. Because learners who are prepared, they can introduce any topic well. They can conclude any topic well. And we expect learners to do well because it's given 2 marks for introduction and 2 marks for conclusion. And then coming to improvement plan, what is it that you must constantly do this term? Update the resources. I've already given you some of the content that you must update using in this presentation. Update the content using Term2 addenda. Explain the meaning of concepts in each lesson. Every lesson that you're going to start in Term2, whether it's management and leadership, whether it's investment, securities, insurance, make sure that you explain all concepts. And your sources, they also have got meaning of concepts that you can also use, but clearly and thoroughly explain them. Identify keywords in each topic that will assist learners to remember facts. Teaching and learning should be informed by the examination guideline. We've talked about that. Explain to the learners these notes, number 9, 10, 12.1.1, and 12.1.2, 13, and 14.1. They are there in the marking guideline. Explain that to them, because it will tell them exactly how they're going to be marked. Make this part of your teaching and learning. You can invite your subject advisor to the classroom. Administer regular informal assessment tasks and provide immediate feedback to learners. You know your learners. Profile your learners quarterly, meaning that right by now, you know how your learners have performed in March. And from that, you can already profile them. You know them. And use differentiated teaching and assessment methods given your findings from your profile. Informal assessment tasks should be marked accordingly to the national principles of marking. I mean, sometimes when I visit schools, what I find is that teachers sometimes they give informal assessment, but when it comes to marking of that informal assessment, they don't mark it accordingly. For example, they'll give an essay, but instead of marking that essay as expected, they mark it differently. And remember, when you mark informal assessment, it's like you are giving feedback to your learners. So we are emphasizing the fact that even informal assessment, mark it properly, take into account the principles of marking that are nationally stated and acceptable. And what will give you those principles is the nose to markers. And administer essay questions for each topic completed and avoid global marking. I know sometimes when I visit, when it comes to essays, teachers, they, of course, ask learners to do self-marking. But it cannot be self-marking all the way, all the time. There should be informal tasks that are marked by you as the teacher. Mark your learners. Mark your learners and give direct and proper feedback so that they know This is how we are going to be marked. And it's a pity when it comes to essays, because essays, they require you to go through to read and they can take time. You want an easy way out. While we emphasizing essays, we emphasize essays because essays, they are allocated a lot of marks. And if learners can do well in essays, surely chances of them doing well is already very high because of that. Still with improvement plan, we expect you to develop a diagnostic report or item analysis on every formal assessment task administered. By now, you have marked your learners. You have marked the match test. Do you have already your item and error analysis? As you were marking, you must have picked up topics, and here we are talking about Term 1 topics now. Topics that were kind of problematic to your learners in Term 1. And that gives you an opportunity to go back and clarify that. That's what we mean by saying develop a diagnostic report or item analysis on every formal test assessment task administered. And that is within your control. Attend PLC meetings and share good practices with colleagues. I know in your districts right now, you've got PLCs, you've got clusters, you've got cluster leaders. Don't underestimate the importance and the power that these groupings have. Because if you are a PLC, you are a group of teachers, you've got expertise, you bring different ideas to the table. That can only strengthen and improve performance in your cluster. So attend and be prepared to share good practices with teachers around you. No one can really, by now, still want to go solo and operate on him or herself. Attend PLC meetings when they are convened. Show interest in your learners and know them by names. Conduct a diagnostic assessment on topics that progress to grade 12 before teaching the new content. Already, when you look at the topics that you are going to be teaching right now, most of them, they progress from the previous grade. They progress from the previous grade and conduct diagnostic assessment. Check how much do your learners know, so that you start this new content knowing, okay, they already have got gaps here and here and here. Like the question of quality that I spoke about, that you look at quality of performance. You have quality that is treated as way back as grade 10. Reflect on your teaching and assessment methods at the end of each lesson and establish if the lesson objectives were achieved. It's important that you reflect. Sometimes you go to class, but when you come back, you must be able to tell yourself that, yes, I've achieved my lesson objectives today. Or you can, sit down and say, I went to class, but I achieved 0. I did not achieve what I wanted to achieve. And then you ask yourself, what prevented you from achieving that? And then you improve. It's only when you sit down and you reflect that you can improve even on your practice as a teacher in class. And you cannot, not talk about the importance of getting well prepared before going to class. You must prepare thoroughly before you go to class. It should not be just a routine kind of a thing. Morning and afternoon classes, I know you do have that, should be aimed at closing gaps rather than rushing to complete the syllabus. Don't have those classes to complete the syllabus, rather have them to close gaps. What is it that I think they are struggling on? and try to close that so that you know before you move to the next topic, your learners are clear. Because what's the point of rushing to complete, but you still have got lots of gaps, outstanding gaps? It's not going to assist. Subject advisors will conduct on-site school visits to monitor curriculum coverage, or they can even, this term, they will come and moderate the match test, the SBA test, and even suggest intervention strategies. And when intervention strategies are sort of suggested to you, implement the strategies. And then in conclusion, I want to say to you, this is Term 2. And we've talked about a lot of things that you still have got to do. You can look back at what happened in Term 1. Now this is Term 2. The secret of change is to focus on, is to focus all of your energy now, not on fighting the old, but on building the new. Learn from your mistakes and be prepared to change from what you've learned and focus on the new now, so that come Term 2, everything is as expected. And I want to take this moment to wish you all the best for Term 2 and also encourage you, because I've learned that there are still schools that have not yet submitted marks. And I'm asking myself, how on earth are there teachers who still have not yet marked? Because I saw a recent circular that is even signed by the HOD. So I don't think the business studies community falls within that. I know you must have marked, submitted marks. The focus right now is on Term 2. You are done with marking. All that you should be focusing on is analyzing how your learners did and going forward. But as to marking, no, you must have submitted that. So I wish you all the best. And I'm going to take this time to, I see there are a few questions on the chat box that I will respond to. And the first question was on what happens if there are two concepts in a sentence. Can they just focus on one core of the sentence or still? Okay, if I understand this question well, remember, if learners are being asked to explain a concept, but in their explanation, they explain in full. If they explain in full, they will get their full 2 marks. But if they don't explain in full, they will forfeit. Now, the question is, if there are two concepts in a sentence, I don't understand clearly that, but maybe the teacher wanted to ask if the responses or the explanations, is like 2 in 1. If it is 2 in 1, learners will still get their full marks, because what we are looking for is there in that sentence. But still encourage your learners to answer in full. And then there's also another one which says, for example, there's one sentence, but the sentence includes macro and market environment. The question wants to focus, for example, on macro. Can the learners only focus on that sentence, or should they code the full sentence, which includes market, environment, and soil? What if the small code team provides the correct answer? Still, look, what is important, if the quotation is in the box, encourage your learners, because it is given to them. Rather, they must code that in full. Because if they don't quote in full, we also look for the essence in the quotation. If what they have quoted, there's no essence, they will forfeit marks, and those quotations are normally easy questions and it's just 1 mark. And like I said, 1 mark, it's important. We can't just underestimate the importance of 1 mark. I hope I've addressed that, but maybe even the subject advisors on a one-on-one basis can clarify that better. I don't want to keep you long even further. I want to take this moment to wish you well. Wish you a good rest this weekend, but all the best for Term 2, and make sure that come June examination, your learners are well prepared. I'm going to share this PowerPoint presentation together with the recording with the subject advisors, who will definitely share this with you. Thank you very much, colleagues. And make sure that you have signed the attendance register. That register is still open up until 16th. Yes, yes. So this presentation and this meeting, it stands adjourned. And I thank you.
Thank you, Ntate.
Thank you, ma'am.
Great presentation. Thank you, Ntate Mui.